Hello, I'm Jim Wright. In this intervention central video, I'll be giving you advice for how to define and analyze a student's academic problems in a manner that will increase the odds that you can match that student to an effective intervention. Being able to put into words exactly what a student's academic concerns are is a first, and I would argue the most important step in developing an individualized intervention plan. After all, if you can't adequately name the problem, you can't fix it. So, here are the steps for defining a student's academic problem. First, describe the problem. Then, format your description as a three-part problem identification statement. And finally, choose a hypothesis, a best guess, for what is the most likely cause of that problem. Let's begin. The first step in defining and analyzing the academic problem is to describe it. So here are examples. Terrence has difficulty naming his letters, or Sophia is slow in completing multiplication math facts 0 to 9. In this initial step, our objective is to narrow the focus to specific skills, such as letter identification or facility with multiplication facts, that we believe are the current blockers to student academic success. And don't worry, in our next step, we're going to be expanding these descriptions to include more important detail. One frequent pitfall that teachers run into when they try to describe student academic problems is that they tend to phrase those problems in general, vague terms. For example, instructors may use statements like, Janine is a poor reader, or Sky can't handle math word problems. The problem is that when academic problems are stated this broadly, it's just about impossible to identify those specific subskills that are actually interfering with student success. I have a couple of suggestions to help you to be more specific in your academic problem descriptions. For starters, when available, use research-derived checklists that break global academic skills into more specific components. For example, the National Reading Panel published an influential report some years ago that organized the broad competency of reading into the component skills of phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, text fluency, and comprehension. So, the teacher who begins her problem description with Janine is a poor reader can use this 5 components of reading model to focus, to narrow the concern to Janine reads with limited fluency. A similar approach is to take any global academic task that the student struggles with and task analyze it, break it down into the component skills necessary for success on the larger task. For example, the teacher who initially states that Sky cannot handle math word problems can develop a checklist that details the range of skills required for success on word problems. A partial list would include the student's understanding of math and general vocabulary terms, the student's ability to translate the word problem into one or more number sentences, the student's correctly applying math operations in the correct sequence to solve number sentences. Based on his knowledge of the student, the instructor can now use this task analysis checklist to hone in more specifically on the skill deficit that the student struggles most with. For example, Sky lacks an understanding of common math vocabulary terms. The second step is to expand your description of the student deficit into a full problem identification statement, one that places the problem within a meaningful instructional context. You use a simple 3-part formula to write this problem ID, problem identification statement. Here are those 3 elements: conditions, problem description, and typical or expected level of performance. Under conditions, you note the environmental conditions or task demands in place when that academic problem is observed. Under problem description, you're specifying the observable academic behavior that the student has difficulty carrying out. If available here, you're going to want to include specifics about student performance, such as the rate of their work, accuracy of their work, or other relevant quantitative information. Under typical or expected level of performance, you would be calculating a minimum acceptable standard or performance level for this skill or behavior. Expected academic performance can be calculated in several ways. For example, you can use benchmark norms, or you can actually compile local norms in your classroom to get a sampling of student performance. Or you can even come up with an expected level of performance based on your expert opinion as a teacher. Now, check out these examples of academic problem ID, problem identification statements. When completing an introductory level algebra word problem, Anne is unable to translate that word problem into an equation with variables, while most peers in her class have already mastered the skill. Or for science homework, Ty turns in assignments an average of 50% of the time, while the classroom median rate of homework turned in is 90%. Or when given a 2-minute timed worksheet of multiplication math facts, 0 to 9, Brad computes an average of 21 correct digits, while the math computation benchmark norm for Brad's grade level is 42 correct digits. So that's the simple 3-part formula for writing these problem ID statements. Our third and final step in fully understanding the student's academic problem is to select a hypothesis, or best guess, based on the evidence, that explains the academic skill or performance problem. Why is this happening? Your hypothesis states the most likely reason or cause for that student's academic problem. You can then use your hypothesis statement kind of as a compass needle that will point you toward interventions that are more likely to address that student's academic problems. Let's look at several of the most common explanations for poor student academic performance and talk a little bit about how to fix them. Skill deficit. In this scenario, your student has not yet acquired the skill. You can address skill deficits with teaching and interventions that provide direct, explicit instruction. And you're also going to be reinforcing that student both for effort and for accuracy. Fluency deficit. This is a situation in which that student has acquired the basic skill but is not yet proficient. For students who fit this profile, you want to provide frequent opportunities for that student to practice the skill, and you want that student to receive timely performance feedback. You'll also make a point to reinforce the student for fluency, that is for speed, as well as for accuracy. Generalization. Here the deficit is that the student possesses the necessary academic skills but fails to use them in the appropriate situations or settings. To address this deficit, you can train that student to identify the relevant markers or characteristics of situations or settings when that skill should be used. You'll also provide praise, encouragement, and perhaps other incentives for the student to apply that skill in the appropriate settings. So, that's the process for taking a systematic approach to defining a student's academic problem. As a result of following this 3-step approach, your problem statement becomes the key that then leads you to effective intervention ideas. So for a quick recap, in defining academic problems, we move through these 3 important steps. Describe the problem. Format your description as that 3-part problem ID statement. Conditions, problem description, typical or expected level of performance. And finally, select that hypothesis for why that problem is occurring. Is it a skill deficit? Is it a fluency deficit? Is it a generalization deficit? Etc. This concludes our brief tutorial on defining student academic problems. If you would like more information on the topic, you can go to this web address and download a handout. Just look for the link with the title of this Intervention Pathways video. I'm Jim Wright. Thank you so much for watching.